I spoke to Monty, and we had a very good discussion. I sensed a lot of passion coming from him. He's also a I don't give a fuck sort of thing. As long as, but he wanted me to be his deputy, but by then it was already too late anyways. Not that I would take the position, you know. I recognize you can't do shit, right, in that position, right? Yeah. He's also missing a lot of history, which I think you and I both know that takes a long time to pick up. I mean, even Princess has come, it took her a while to come to, you know what I mean?
Sure.
I actually really, I had a very, well, I convinced him to run for the North, right? But I had no intention of like backing either, because I do think that they should both run on their merits, and it's a bit of political suicide for us to back anybody, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, we got our shit to deal with. Us meddling is not on my agenda. However, after that shit that happened, I decided yesterday to back him a bit more publicly. Not openly on Twitter and shit like that, but rather our let's just call it our lobby team or whatever the fuck.
Sure.
And the reason is that I need someone else doing the demanding. And I don't know why the DOJ aggroed me on Saturday. I wouldn't have run. And now for whatever fucking reason, BCSO is aggroing. So they're done. Marty has full intention of wiping them. It's unfortunate. It really is. Like, I don't know what fucking, you know, I don't understand.
Well,
I don't understand why they only view the city and its people as their personal playpen that they can abuse. I don't understand how in any fucking reality, right? You can be butthurt that I don't trust someone, and that being the center of conversation.
Yeah.
To see, think of the 115 months. Like, I need to think that they're an angel. Like, your fucking guy might be taking pictures of my fucking groin at this point. You know what I mean? Who the fuck stalk, like, law enforcement stalking? Like, this is like some, like, straight out of the, you know, news cycle type shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And just not even batting an eye? Fuck out of here. So,
I think if I have one fault to point out with Princess is that she does pander to the BCSO, right?
And I get it, brother, because who's going to fight them? It's one massive clique.
Yeah.
Right? You saw Cassidy, you saw Bones. These guys didn't even need to exist. They just existed and allow their, their people to do whatever they saw fit in their vision. They are not a vision of the people, right? What do you think how often Bones used to flaunt, oh man, did you see how many votes I got, motherfucker?
Yeah.
That shit you can't even compare. You know, motherfucking Brainley talking about, like, back when our, taxpayer account was over 1,000. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But that's the inherent issue, isn't it? That the BCSO isn't representative of the needs of Blaine County. And because of that, they're in the financial problems that they're in, right? Sure, Princess has compounded it. Absolutely, right?
I don't think it's... I'm not going to hold Princess at fault for not having the... Brother, we cannot even for a little bit fault Princess for dealing with BCSO's cry bully.
Sure.
You know what I mean? She knows what it comes with.
Yeah. when I say compounded, I mean like buying properties and dwindling the budget down further, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, they're paying millions of dollars for a bunch of deputies that don't even patrol the county that they're enlisted to serve.
Well, there comes the next piece. I think we need to legislate these bank accounts being under mayoral control. PD accounts.
Oh, the PD accounts?
Yes.
Yeah, it would make sense.
And the reason I say that is I'm just going to just flatly, those accounts exist because it was an idea myself and one of the marshals had 9 months ago because we wanted PD to budget, right?
Yeah.
However, the intent and all that was not this. Unfortunately, they've gamified, and once again, I'm not using that in any fucking weird way. They sort of gamified arrests. In other words, it's sort of become
stack charges to get a new engine.
Exactly. Yeah. And there's no other way to piecemeal it, right? Yeah. It goes against it's become like a public hazard effectively. So I would like to see that redirected, and I think that's important because what that budget has done has decoupled the police department from the people, right? There's no accountability. What's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
So that's something I want to explore.
I think that's a good one. I think, would you entertain bringing back like a liaison position
from the PD,
or dedicating a cabinet member as the liaison to the PD?
We have Bailey.
Oh, right.
And Turner. Yeah. Why have that?
Yeah. No, I completely forgot about Bailey's role. No,
fundamentally, the city just does not benefit from arrests and the police department.
Yeah.
Right. So if that money instead is being directed to the county accounts and that we are paying out based on whatever, then that should be it because there is no benefit. What is the benefit? No, they effectively can, it doesn't, it's, and like I said, what happened at Strawberry gas station, I don't have time. People don't have time for that shit. If they can't resolve it quickly, then no. It's they've sort of lost my confidence immediately.
Yeah.
It's.
Yeah, I like the idea. I like it.
So it'll be very interesting how things get chopped up. Let's go through each thing.
From the governor?
Yes. Make sure we digest it all. So two have been reviewed, not the other two.
He responded to the right to property as well. Did you see that?
He did. I had a yes, because the right to property, a lot of it doesn't need to exist anymore, more or less.
To be clear, though, that his response to that shouldn't be undervalued. It's basically this only needed to exist because people were doing things that they shouldn't have been doing, which is an important statement for him to make.
Yeah, let's go through each one. We'll start with right to property, and then we'll go to penal, and then we'll go to the other one.
Sure.
All right, let me see. Okay, so right to property act. You're right. This should be covered with the new legislation on penal code changes. Thus affirming and going back the Department of Justice. All right.
Yeah.
So penal code changes of San Andreas. So the first is he highlighted the segment for remedies requested, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which was our suggestion, which is perfect. This is literally what I told Weiss, and he subsequently told Hart in front of Quintum he has no interest in doing any of it. Well, which reads, a review is conducted with mayoral cabinets and SAMA to create a document that compares pre-change and post-change charges. The document should put forward a penal code that encompasses charges based on legislation. Right? Some of those aren't based on legislation. Or a criminal code for San Andreas, which the latter of which is going to be a bigger effort, but I think we should kind of notate it in that thing. So I can imagine in this Excel sheet, we can say, is it in legislation? No. Remedy, suspend, right? Future remedy, incorporate into criminal code, because some of these things require significantly more work. And I think a part of the document, like the let's call it the cover letter, should be that these are going to be the phases. Phase 1 is like more of an immediate remedy, right? Second is like phase 2. Third is phase 3, where phase 3 would be this grander effort that we want to do anyways, which is sort of like reducing down a lot of these pieces of legislation into more comprehensive criminal codes, like the robbery one, for example. So that takes the interests of the citizens of San Andreas into consideration, which is fantastic, right? Because fine and time is very much an interest, right? Is the fine and time emphasizing fine and time should be representative of how damaging that crime is to the populace. As an example, attempted murder of a government official. That is a high fine and time because it prevents the police. You're taking out law enforcement, which protects people, right?
Yeah.
And I think the bar that we use in order to measure fine and time should be a product of the Constitution, right? And a product of how it is a deterrent. What do I mean by this? Let's use attempted murder of government official. Understandably, it should be high because it affects the fair trial and due process. You're preventing that from happening when you take out a cop. Health and protection of others, right? It's taking life. So, right, as an example, it has huge, like, on a scale of, like, if you were to say, how much does shooting a cop in a situation, how much does it affect the, these things, the number, it would be like a 9 out of 10. It's up there, right? And as such, fine and time should be up. And I think that same sort of thing can be levied against these other things. But anyways, explains the rationale behind why these are changing. And lastly, made public. So I'll read it just one more time in a complete. A review is conducted with the mayoral cabinets and SAMA to create a document that compares pre-change and post-change charges. The document should put forward a penal code that encompasses charges based on legislation or a criminal code for San Andreas that takes the interests of the citizens of San Andreas into consideration, explains the rationale behind why these things are changing, and lastly, make it public. So we go through that process. We'll make a template first. So if you decide to like pre-cook on this, I'm going to give you DO stuff.
Yeah,
but
please. Don't
go too deep into this until I review the template, just so, just so we don't go too deep before having sort of the vision laid out, I guess.
Yeah.
In regards to that, repaired penal code. Okay, I think this is the doc. Give me a sec. Oh my God, this is amazing. Dio, I think, is a absolute fucking legend. Look at what he made. Pull that up while you got a chance.
Where'd you send it?
Text message. Oh, whoops. I sent it to him by accident.
Okay.
So he's already done a big part of the work. He's got the old time, old fine, new time and new fine, time change, cost change. So this is going to make it very easy to sort of go through, but I think it's missing some columns that we can put in, like the ones I mentioned. Is it backed by legislation? Is it not backed by legislation? Does the charge make sense? A place to put those things. So going back to this. So the state responded. This request is accepted. The review will be signed by the state before it's passed. So we'll send them the document. They can read it, etc. Give them room to, review it or whatever. I will clarify below the examples of logic in which the penal code should be enacted. I did ask for this because I did send the meeting notes and all that, and a lot of this got like short-circuited, which is good.
Yeah.
Because my biggest thing is like, I was made aware of responses were coming, but my biggest thing was, hey, for everyone's sake, I think clarifying some of these things is good, and I think it was clarified quite well. So it says to clarify 2, 3, and 4, and 2, 3, and 4 being, immediate. I don't know what is clarify points 2, 3, and 4. I think that references the remedies requested, right?
That's right. Yeah.
It is unconstitutional to modify or enact any law upon the citizens of San Andreas without passing the proper legislative processes. We have it in writing. This is an official document. It's never going to happen again. We can always cite this, right? So the next is legislation refers to written laws enacted by a legislative body. The penal code is legislation. Thank fucking God. Like,
I'm gonna.
this is 9 months in the making. You know what I mean? Everything that we have always mentioned, we finally have it. And so as bad as it's been, this has been such a huge win for everybody.
Yeah.
Even though this should have been common sense, but it's written down.
It guarantees that the judicial powers audit that we put through is going to result in an amendment, because they've been using that as an excuse to change things, right?
You're jumping ahead a little bit. Today my brain, just for reference, is I'm very single track today.
Gotcha.
That's on me. It's just, coffee. I've been awake for too many hours lately. So the DOJ can enact the penal code immediately as long as it references the judicial matter or proceedings it is based off and is documented like other case law for citizens to see. I just registered what you said. You're saying that this is reaffirming that the power that the justices thought they had, where they could just magically change penal code, is no longer the case.
That's right.
Yes, absolutely. Actually, what I'm going to do is we'll jump to that one on that point, and then we'll jump back to this. So penal code, in which it is now written The reading being points 4 and 5, which is reaffirm legislative sovereignty and establish supplemental legislation, is that you are free to write pieces based on what you feel will more emphasize your needs to understand this as people. I would suggest getting input from all authorities. I think that's fantastic. We can reference the responses here and highlight in very clear, plain English that the DOJ is simply the mechanism. That without legislation, it will not exist. Which is good. Okay. So, Penal Code will change the Penal Code immediately as long as the DOJ can change it. I skipped. So, I will clarify below examples. Right. I will clarify below examples of the logic in which the Penal Code should be enacted. Feel free to emphasize them in your draftings. This document should be able to cover all points we have discussed and want amended. Right? In your draftings. Oh, this is good. Okay. It is unconstitutional to modify or enact any laws upon the citizens without the process. Example, the DOJ can change the Penal Code immediately as long as it references the judicial matter or proceedings it is based off and is documented like other case law for the citizens to see. The DOJ can change the Penal Code with no proceeding or matter reference, though it must pass the same process as any other contestable law. To note, immediate case law or Penal Code changes can still be contested after they have been processed. That was huge. That is huge. Right? So I don't think we need to do this, because I think even though the manner by which the case law was passed recently with some of the shit that they put up, even though it's not precedent and case law, blah, 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 is the affirmation that those things can be audited. This is a very big underlining piece that that I did get clarity on, is that just because there is a ruling, just because they say, let's say, just because, well, actually, I'll mention it afterwards, after these examples. Fulfillment of Penal Code change requirements. When making Penal Code changes, it too should fall under a logical threshold for it to be considered acceptable. The same way when you find someone guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, you put them in jail. In other words, if something needs to be deemed illegal as a consequence of a judicial matter or contestable law, that the threshold needs to be beyond a reasonable doubt, not just like I think it feels like. It should be considered logical that a group of your peers would come to the same conclusion, and you are able to articulate either a constitutional or legislative reason for making that Penal Code change. That is actually huge, because I would argue that's like at least a quarter of the of the shit that's been going through does not pass this threshold. Right? It's feelings. It's based on reasonable suspicion. There's something I want to point out here. This is the first time a state official has actually underlined something we were talking about adding, which is reasonable belief. This definition that he's using, considered logical that a group of your peers would come to the same conclusion, is the definition for reasonable belief. So we can use this as a reference point for that bigger document we talked about, right? Is codifying reasonable suspicion, probable cause, etc., because that doesn't actually exist. The closest thing that exists in legislation today is if you look at like whatever the case law, the common law document, which, how familiar are you with reasonable suspicion, probable cause, all that?
Enough.
Okay. So The closest one to it is actually Terry v. Ohio, which they only wrote to be a police officer may stop a suspect on the street and frisk them. Frisk him or her without probable cause to arrest. If the police officer has reasonable suspicion that the person has committed So they undercooked this. Terry versus Ohio is not just for Terry frisks. That is when that happened, it's not just this one, but there's another case law I'm forgetting, is where RS sort of stemmed from. So, the reason I point that out is getting these things into place, I think, is going to be very important, especially when we consider recent cases and even the case with the PD's warrant got thrown out, because Opal wrote something a certain way. All those things should be clarified. Why? Because then people know what that bar is. Law enforcement know what that bar is. Lawyers know what that bar is. Judges know what that bar is. Because right now we are dealing with opinions on what RS is, opinions of what PC is, not opinions of if something is RS, right? In other words, there's debate on what the definition of RS, PC, reasonable, preponderance of, all this shit even is. Anyways, back to this, because I could yap on that for a second. A simple example is something that should pass easier. If someone was arrested with a rocket launcher in their possession, you cannot make them illegal without justifying either a constitutional or legislative reason. Simply, you could note that the impact caliber of the weaponry reference people dying to small weapons that are illegal and push through the change. In other words, guns cannot exist based on the weapon legislation in which we are referencing 9mm firearms, which cause harm. This RPG is 100 times the caliber and does more harm. Therefore, illegal. Therefore, bigger fine and time. Easy.
Yeah.
Simple example is something that can be questionable. If someone was found with jump boots and you discover they're coming from the cargo ship, if the thought is they're coming from the same place that is lots of illegal activity, let's ban them. Is it reasonable someone could argue if they're on a ship, they too can get posted, delivered? Can you articulate, where in the constitutional legislation these bend the law or someone's rights? So, huge.
Yeah, big wins. Big wins. That all makes sense. I will cook on the template a little bit, but I think I only have to step away here for about an hour. I think if we can circle back, there's a couple other things I want to pick your brain on regarding the whole penal code revision process.
Here, before we move forward, remember the priority list?
Yep.
I want, if there's anything you're going to work on, I would say create a priority list, a title, and what low level what it is. Yeah, and I think we start using that. We don't need to use any fancy tools and shit. We fucking tried that a while back. It's too much. Yeah. Instead, let's use that as our board of what are the things we want to do. And that includes whatever it is you're about to say. And the reason I say that is we do have a tendency to try to solve too much at once. And we do lose focus because understandably we get distracted, but myself, yourself, there's only two of us, right?
Yeah.
We have other help, but 80% of the lifting is us, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's going to help us not lose sight and be more efficient in completing this stuff. But
sure. Yeah.
That's not to say don't work on this other stuff. Just at least when we're working together, what we're gonna,
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah. Makes sense. No, really, all I wanted to bring up was as the penal code is looked at, right, and as things like fines and times are set, you do take things into consideration, like you said, the severity of the offense, the extent of harm to an individual or property or
society. Yep.
Right. What other things should we be taking into consideration? And where I was kind of going with that is you get into things like intent versus negligence. You get into things like prior offenses in criminal history. You also get into things like judicial discretion, even PD discretion, right, to give time off. And I think about the Den Act and how polarizing that whole situation was, right? Eventually resulted in Bailey stepping down. So when I look at the penal code exercise, I think it calls for a broader lens in some ways. Now, things like criminal history obviously may not carry as much weight in San Andreas, right?
Yeah.
Which makes total sense. But I remember, and you should remember, how polarizing a day it was when the Den Act got put up, Bailey stripped it, Angel throws it back up. The PD they were in shambles that day, right? And then Bailey ultimately stepped down. And I think that's all related, right?
I might need you to run it back.
The Den, you remember the Den Act, right?
Yes, where
PD were kind of stripped of the discretion to take time off and so it when I want to set fines and times for something, right, in the penal code, I would take officer discretion into consideration when setting something like that. But that has been, I would argue, has been quite restricted through the Den Act. So.
I think we repeal the Den Act.
Yeah.
Or modify it.
I think that's...
Let's add that to like our list. Like,
yeah, agreed.
Review Den Act maybe even in advance of this penal code shit. And maybe even asterisks. Review anything that may be related to coming to a good determination as to what things are. In other words, there might be like auxiliary legislation that needs to be taken into consideration when figuring out what the penal code looks like. So that's a really good point.
I think it's kind of a two-pronged exercise, right? We can fix the most recent changes quite easily with effectively a rollback, but I think in terms of actually fixing the penal code, it's going to require that full review of legislation, that full restructuring of legislation, the creation of a criminal code.
Yeah.
And then I think you get to a place where literally everyone is in a better spot and the PD can be given the authority to exercise discretion. And everyone will be happier because of it, right? But yeah, I'll work on this thing, it seems.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, I like that. So I'll give you my high level opinion on the you might find this shocking. I'm not necessarily too far off with Angel's disposition. The problem is that she was an asshat when she approached Peters about it, right? And the way that she approached Peters was not to underline what was probably going through her head. She just wanted a big dick. That's it.
Yep.
And that led to, instead of it being a conversation, it turned into a shit show, right? Where she threatened Peters and now all of a sudden, you know, the highest level of fucking LSPD became under the impression that came away with a certain impression instead of an understanding. Now, to go with what I think it was is, you know, what do you call it? Discretion has a I do not think that PD should have a discretion as to whether or not time is reduced or fine is reduced. Because when you do that, you make the PD experts in choosing who should be punished more and who should be punished less.
Yep.
Thus leading to a situation in which they become judges, right?
Yep.
It also leads to a circumstance where their friends or people that they like have less time than people that they hate, thus turning it more into a form of a retaliatory tool, right? Rather than justice being properly served. As an example, if someone liked Hydra and they're besties, right? Not to confuse that word with the gang, but well, actually, well, you know what? If I was a cop and Hydra was cool to me, I decide as one of 4 processing officers to give 50% time off because Flippy made me laugh.
Yeah.
But at the same fucking time, I don't know why I keep sounding like this Brian Knight guy today. I think I just need extra sleep. Fucking, but then, you know, fucking the second processing officer does not like them and he gives them the full fine and time. Now Flippy is in jail now for 50 months for the same crime, whereas Ash Ketchup is in there for 300, right?
Yeah.
Even worse, Hydra for bank trucks are going in for full time, but someone in shift 2, ADMC, is going in for 50%. That creates a fucking huge problem, right?
Yeah, agreed.
So, yeah, it's yeah, let's revisit that whole thing.
Can I ask one more question? Because you'll have the history on this. Is unlawful gain ever factored into a charge? So, for example, someone commits fraud and they defraud someone of $1 million. The amount in which they gain from their criminal activity is how the fine is set.
I'm sorry, you're gonna have to run that back. Does anyone find it?
Let's say someone commits bank fraud in San Andreas to the amount of $1 million. Instead of having a defined amount for fraud, let's say a fine of $3,000. The fine amount is based on the unlawful gain from the crime.
You're talking about like robberies, right? Has that ever existed? Fraud, is what you're asking?
Right. Is my question? Yeah, fraud.
Yes,
would be the easy.
So back in the day, and actually, oh my God, this is a great topic. Actually, I'm gonna once again disclaimer, right? Because we're in that space where some things that are said can make it seem like something else, even though that's what we're seeing in some cases, and not meant to mean anything else. The current system, in my opinion, is designed to reward law enforcement that just fucking pog bombs. I'm going to explain why. Back in the day, right, when I used to take cases for someone that robbed Polito Bank, oftentimes, most times, law enforcement would arrest and target an individual with the proceedings. And as such, or individuals, as a consequence, like my client who had the proceeding or clients with the proceedings would be charged for the robbery, and then they would be charged for the proceeds. And those proceeds may be a little, they may be a lot, right? Now, after came this notion of the umbrella charges, right? Because the robbery of a bank, generally speaking, was the insurance covers it, it doesn't affect anybody, yada da.
Kind of a victimless crime,
Yeah, victim assignment, except for offshore insurance companies,
Right.
and no one really gives a fuck about that, right?
Right.
So, as a consequence of all this, what would happen is, and so like now look at where we are today. Those proceeds are almost never got. And instead it's about arrest whoever. And so it's sort of like if you want to make an impact, a beneficiary impact to the institution known as BCSO or LSPD, your biggest impact is by putting more money in the budget. Right? So, and because it's inconsequential whom in said activity you arrest, and in fact, it's even more beneficial if you overexceed your mandate as a law enforcement and create a circumstance where you are shot, you benefit. Who are going to be the ones that are seen as the all-stars? The driver? The one that may be escalating and putting themselves in positions where it's now a shootout, right? This is, and so what we're saying is we are the structure itself is rewarding that behavior.
Yeah.
I will say that it's distinctly to underline, right? Like, it's not rewarding someone like, say, a Frost-like officer, right? Who's extremely diligent. Or even, I would argue, someone like Aaron Carter, who spends a lot of time investigating, takes on cases. No, it is actually rewarding monetarily targeting whoever and getting the arrest and quickly processing.
Yeah.
There is no, and so I hope that answers the question.
It does.
Right?
Yeah, it does.
So it doesn't mean
really
that's, and I think it's important to highlight, like, even when I talk about like certain officers, right? It's not to say they themselves are inherently an issue, because the system rewards it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's how that department makes money. It's similar to, like, aggressive like ticketing in cities, and why some of it's been illegalized is because if you're sitting there just giving someone like 90 tickets a week, fucking PD's gonna jerk you off. Fucking, you know what I mean? The chief is gonna sit back. Sheriff's gonna sit back like, hell yeah, brother.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I think some of those things can be sort of sorted out in a different way.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The context is really helpful. It is.
So I will say that I don't think it was intentional. It's just that these systems kind of like began to reward that. And, when a system rewards, naturally, it's natural selection ends up taking place, right?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Grayson and I have talked about this at a very, very high level. He cited an example of overseeing a murder trial or something along those lines, where a person was fined X millions of dollars, but he oversaw another murder trial and he only fined the person, let's say, $250K, because that judicial system that he was operating under took into consideration things like the person's ability to pay in the first place, right?
Yeah.
Which are important things for a judge to consider. But there's a really long list of things you take into consideration when you establish a fine. So the context is helpful, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think having a good methodology and actually documenting that once again in that cover letter, I think is important, so that future people see where the methodology came from and may use that. Like, I want to fully derive it out, right?
Yeah.
And I would even say that a rating system may be worth using as a tool, right? These are these, what is it, 7 or 8 constitutional like rights, right? How much is being violated on a scale of 1 to 10?
Yeah.
Right? For this crime or for this possession or whatever. And I think that can help guide as opposed to it being a feeling. There could be auxiliary reasons too, but I think we can discover that as we're going through it all.
I agreed. I think the greater, if you could believe it, the greater benefit of disclosing the methodologies, then people can challenge it, and that's not a bad thing.
And it's exactly, and we already have it, like, it's public. It's like, this is why it is.
Honestly, when you're doing something like that, you invite anyone and everyone to tell you why you're wrong and why, so you can make it better. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, I got to run for about 30, but you can link back up later on if you want.
Yeah. Campaign, we got to get people to the polls. I think that's very important.
In your glove box.
Beautiful, thank you. Oh my lord, thank you. You want some?
I have some.
Okay, easy. All right. Brother, let me get you back.
Yeah, appreciate it. I'll get cracking on a priority list. I think, I kind of want to see what the governor says about the other contests, but I think we've been given a lot of clarification.
Yeah.
That let's call it a battle plan. The battle plan can at least be drafted out in rough right now. So.
Yeah. Yep. I agree.
A lot of people that I've talked to the last few days are really high on the idea of the restructuring of legislation, right? Trimming it down and categorizing it.
Yeah.
And then the making of the penal code. People really want that.
I think on that list, we need a better legislative template so that we can push to unify that template.
Yeah.
And because it's kind of ass still. I wish we had, I don't know. Like, I was looking over it, I try to fix it up a little bit. It's hard to read. I don't know if it's like the MDT font style or what, but
there's a couple things. The MDT formatting is really, really restrictive.
Yeah.
So let's say you want to put something into like a nested list or a bulleted list, it automatically shrinks the font down and you can't increase it, which is problematic.
Oh, yeah.
But there's other structural reasons why. There's a lot of fluff in legislation. In a lot of our pieces, the first page and a half isn't even relevant to the general citizen.
Yeah, I agree.
But we have to put in a page-long constitutional justification because there was a time when the DOJ was ruling everything unconstitutional. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
it would be nice if you could...
Oh my God, I forgot that.
Yeah.
We couldn't even do anything in the first term because it'd be like unconstitutional.
Yeah.
And it'd be, we should sit back and read, like go through memories of like OG legislation. To be fair, yeah, it was, oh my God. I remember those times. It was like, we would write like something simple like, hey, there should be this. And then it'd be like, no.
Yeah.
What do you mean? And then we'd have to write a ton. And then it'd be like, oh, why are you writing such extensive shit? It's like, what do you, like, we have to fucking explain because it's not obvious apparently.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?